Hi guys, so I'm here today to do my June reading wrap up, in which I share with you mini reviews of the books I have read in the month of June. I will also be letting you know the books that I am currently in the process of reading and will finish in the month of July. So without further ado, let's get into the books. I read two collections of poetry in June, so I'll briefly go over those first. The first one is Fighters for Life by Michael Rosen, selected poems. I adore Michael Rosen. I loved Michael Rosen's children's poetry as a child. He was definitely one of my absolute favourite authors throughout my childhood. He was even the Children's Poet Laureate in 2007 to 2009, so high praise for his children's poetry, but this is a collection of his adult poetry and it is equally as phenomenal. These poems are very political. They deal a lot with political issues, with issues of hatred, with social justice issues, with issues of class, with war, and just generally things that affect modern society, although they do cover events from the past few decades as well, not just the most recent years. They were incredibly moving. As you can see, I've tabbed quite a few. Those were my absolute favourites in the collection, but all I can say is this is just a phenomenal collection and I would highly recommend it. If you want a taster of some of Michael Rosen's poetry, he does actually have a blog where he posts poetry, so you can check that out, but like I said, I would highly recommend this collection. The next collection is actually a mixture of different poets and it is Off the Shelf, a celebration of bookshops in verse, edited by Caroline Duffy, and this also features a poem by Caroline Duffy as lots of other poets including Don Patterson, Liz Lockhead, Jackie Kay, and many more, all UK poets writing about bookshops and what bookshops mean to them. So if you are a fan of a bookshop, then I think you will find some wonderful poems to identify with in here that will really recreate that feeling that bookshops give you. And it was a lovely collection because it is a mixture of many different poets. There was some I really enjoyed, some I was just meh about. I think that's just the nature of a collection of multiple poets, is that you're not going to love everything in it because they have quite distinct styles. So loved some of them was just not wowed by. But if you are a lover of bookshops, then I think you will enjoy this collection and find some poems in here that really speak to you. And if you are from the UK or if you're from Scotland, you might even recognise some of the names of the bookshops mentioned in some of these poems, which was quite a nice feeling. But on to the novels I read in June. I read 3 novels in full, and those include The Loney by Andrew Michael Hurley. I'm sure you've heard a lot about this book. It's won a few awards since its release, and it is a bit of a suspenseful horror mystery. It's not like gory horror, it's very much suspenseful, kind of ritualistic, ghost-like horror. Not to say there's necessarily any ghosts in it, but it's that kind of atmosphere. That's the best way I feel like I can summarise it. It's told from the perspective of a teenage boy who comes from quite a religious family, and he goes on a trip with his family and church group as well as their new priest, because their old priest recently passed away under somewhat suspicious circumstances, and they go to visit this somewhat sacred site in the English countryside, and some strange things seem to be going on in the village that this site is located near. And it was not long after their last visit to this site that their previous priest passed away, so there's a lot of interesting things going on there. I definitely, by the time the end came, had not picked up on all the clues. It was quite a slow paced book, but there was still enough of a mystery to keep you engaged, and it was very well written. I certainly didn't know what was going on throughout this book. Maybe I'm just not that quick on the uptake, but I would definitely like to go back and reread this book actually and take account of all the clues I didn't notice the first time. I think that would be a really interesting reading experience, and I think it's the kind of book that I would enjoy rereading, so I think I'd like to do that at some point in the future. But all in all, I think it was a very intriguing mystery, and there was some really interesting characters to follow along that really kept you engaged in the story. And all in all, I just think it was a really enjoyable book. And if you're just looking to get into the kind of suspense horror genre and don't want anything too disturbing and gory and in your face, then I'd highly recommend this one. But all of the books I read this month seem to have a bit of a gruesome theme. The next one is a bit of a post-apocalyptic story, and that is The Girl with All The Gift by M.R. Carey. This book was great. It has such high praise across the board from so many different people, and I think it definitely stands up to that praise. I really enjoyed this novel, more than I even thought I would. And although it is actually a bit of a multiple perspective story, you do follow a few of the different characters and thought processes. It mainly focuses on one young girl who is Melanie, and Melanie goes to school with a bunch of other children much like her who need to be strapped into chairs and wear muzzles when they leave their cells to go to class, and you don't really know why this is. But Melanie is a very clever little girl, as are all of her peers, but she in particular is definitely top of her class. Other than that, you're not quite sure what else is going on, what appears to be a military base amidst this kind of apocalyptic Earth scenario, but it's a very fast-paced book and you find things out quite quickly what's going on, although there are some real intriguing mysteries and plot points that keep you hooked and waiting for answers for, which were great, and I was not disappointed by those answers. But all in all, it is quite an action-fueled, fast-paced book, but at the same time very well written, and I would just really recommend this one again. I really enjoyed it. And lastly is the one I've done a complete review of, and that is Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut. This was my first Kurt Vonnegut book, and my dad recommended it to me, and I'm very glad he did because I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was a book very much full of dark gallow humour, mocking kind of humanity and our flaws, and I really enjoyed that. I think Kurt Vonnegut was a very thoughtful, witty writer, and he had me laughing at really dark themes, which I think was very impressive, and he did it in a really great way. I found this quite an amusing read, although it's not roll on the floor in laughter. It's very witty and definitely had me chuckling at points. It was also an engaging story, although like I said in my review, it's not a story of surprises because you have an omniscient narrator who fills you in on basically everything that's going on in the present and in the future before you even get a chance to wonder. But it's still presented in a very engaging way, and you're intrigued to see how things unfold rather than necessarily what unfolds. And it follows a group of passengers whose cruise ship lands on one of the Galapagos Islands, sort of midst chaos in the wider earth. There seems to be definite kind of political degradation of society going on in the background, and it's kind of about how they survive and who they all are. And all in all, it was just very imaginative, and I very much enjoyed it, but I will link my full review down below. I also completed one non-fiction book this month, and that is The Establishment by Owen Jones. I loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It goes in depth into who in the United Kingdom benefits from our current political climate whilst others suffer, and who tries to maintain the status quo, and how much influence they have over people and even politicians. And it deals with politicians, it deals with the press, it deals with the banks, it deals with lots of different groups of people who ensure that society benefits them because they have the money and skills and power to do so. It's incredibly well researched, it's very in-depth, it interviews lots of different people who could be considered part of the establishment or who have had run-ins with the establishment. It deals with so many different topics. It made me quite angry at points. A lot of these incidents were things I knew about, so it dealt with things like the phone hacking scandal, it dealt with things like the bailout of the banks, it dealt with things like the miners' strike, it dealt with things like the tax scandal where it was discovered that lots of rich businesses and rich people were not paying their taxes through loopholes in tax law. It dealt with the scandal surrounding UK politicians making claims like second homes on the taxpayers. Lots of different things like that, and looks at them as a whole in a larger context. And like I said, it did make me angry. It was a very serious book, and it's a very relevant book, and it points out a lot of flaws in our society, but it also pushes you to think about how we can combat that and how society can benefit the majority and those who have the least, and why it doesn't need to be that way. And although it doesn't plot out a future plan for how we can do that, it gives some suggestions in the conclusion and just makes you think and makes you want to take action and makes you want to work together. And yeah, just a fantastic book. I did talk about it briefly in one of my recent videos, which was books to inspire political activism, so I'll link that down below as well. I would just highly recommend reading The Establishment. It's really hard to talk about it in a short space of time. I might yet do a whole video all about it, but it is probably my if you read one book this year book, so take that for what it is. And I have actually been reading 3 other books which I want to briefly mention to you here. The first one is actually the Feminist Orchestra book club read of June, and this is the first month I haven't actually managed to finish the book in time. The book we're reading is Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor, and this book is a bit of a mixture between science fiction and fantasy, and it deals with very heavy topics. It deals with rape, it deals with female circumcision, also while being set in this world where the main character appears to have magical powers and she's learning to explore those and seeking help to embrace them and learn to use them better. It also deals with issues of race because our protagonist is mixed race and she is the daughter of rape, and like I said, very difficult themes. And I think because this month has just hosted so many difficult events and it's just been quite a difficult month, I wasn't always inclined to continue reading it because it was just so difficult to read. And I am enjoying the story. I'm about 50% of the way through. I just think it hasn't been the book I have been inclined to read this month, but I'll definitely finish it in July and give you a proper review of it. I am intrigued to see where it goes because at this point in time I actually have no idea where it's going, but I do like our main character and I'm interested to see the rest of her adventure. The other 2 books I'm in the process of reading are Arcadia, which I'm only 70 pages in, which is nothing given the size of this book, so I'm sure this one will take up much of my time in July, but what I've read so far I'm really enjoying. It has a lot of different threads, so it can get a little bit confusing, and I think it's a book you need to concentrate on and not be reading much else whilst you're reading, so that's why I haven't got further than 70 pages, because I wanted to make sure it was the only book I was reading before I went any further. But it is very magical and fascinating and I cannot wait to get further into it. And lastly, the next book I am almost finished. I've got about 50 pages left, and that is The Geek, Feminist Revolution by Cameron Hurley. This is a non-fiction collection of Cameron Hurley's essays. It predominantly deals with women in realms that are considered masculine but also nerdy traditionally, and the sexism embedded in these cultures and how it affects women, but a lot of the time from quite a personal perspective of the author, as they are essays. It deals a little bit with television and film and games. It deals a lot with literature. Cameron Hurley has a very strong voice and I've been really enjoying reading this collection. Those are all of the books I have read and have been reading in June though. If you've read any of them, then let me know. I'd love to hear what you think of them. And if you'd like to see full reviews of any of the ones I haven't done full reviews on yet, then also please do let me know. But until next time guys, happy reading and I'll see you all again soon. Bye! Hi guys! So I'm here today to talk to you about the Feminist Orchestra book club, if you haven't heard me talk about it before. In this video I will just briefly update you on what's going on with the book club, what our new reading list is, because I have now picked and set the books for the final 4 months of the year.